Hello, welcome to today's edition of the Academy. And we're going to finish up Sun Tzu's chapter 6. I know this is only the 6th video. I said there was going to be 7, but I took another look at the last few sentences, essentially 26 through the end. And I was going to split them into two, but as I reread it, I looked and noticed that even Sun Tzu's really building one point here, and I could have broken it into two, but I think there'd be a little bit too much repetition between the two videos, so I'm just going to cap it off with this 6th and final video. It may go slightly longer, but it shouldn't be much longer. So let's just dive right into it. So begin with sentence 26. How victory may be produced for them out of the enemy's own tactics, that is what the multitude cannot comprehend. All men can see the tactics whereby I conquer, but what none can see is the strategy out of which the victory is evolved. Do not repeat the tactics which have gained you one victory, but let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances. Military tactics are like unto water. For water in its natural course runs away from high places and hastens downward. So in war, the way is to avoid what is strong and strike at what is weak. Water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. The soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe whom he is facing. Therefore, just as water retains no constant shape, so in warfare there are no constant conditions. He who can modify his tactics in relation to his opponent and thereby succeed in winning may be called a heaven-born captain. The 5 elements, fire, water, wood, metal, and earth, are not always equally predominant. The 4 seasons make way for each other in turn. There are short days and long. The moon has its periods of waning and waxing. So, it's a lot there. It's in a sense wrapping up this chapter and actually relating it to things that have gone before in the previous chapters. But it's relatively easy to go straight forward, and all this applies directly to what we do on the table. So the first sentence kind of leads into the summary, really commenting about how most people do not really comprehend how victory is actually produced by the enemy's actions more than they are your own. And equally so is that it's very easy to see how an individual's tactics actually accomplished the victory in a particular battle, whatever. However, he's very clear to point out that it is very difficult, very few can see all of the preparation and thought, and it will use some of the earlier terms, estimation, measurement, and decision, that had to go into making those tactical decisions, making those tactics play out. So, with that as a background, he starts talking about the tactics themselves. He says, don't repeat the tactics that have gained you victory, which kind of goes against what our common sense. If they worked once, why wouldn't they work again? Well, the idea he's trying to get across here is with the second half of the sentence. It's letting your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances. In other words, those tactics worked that one time because all of the things that had to come into play to allow them to succeed, remember, the enemy helps determine whether you can win or not, all of that went into making the victory. If none of those are present, or few of them are present, in the subsequent attempt to use those same tactics, they'll fail. So you need to modify your tactics based on the circumstances in front of you. In a couple of chapters back, we talked about how all the different seasons changed, and there's infinite variety and direct and indirect text, how everything flowed one to another, and you had to be really nimble and able to make plan B, plan A, plan C, plan D all just come together and switch between them to do what was needed at the time to leverage the situation and hopefully the advantages that the enemy has put in front of you. Now, Sun Tzu himself relates back to previous chapters when he actually brings about the analogy of water. He brought that out in earlier chapters, and he's trying to drive the point home. Again, the idea being all about, just like water, it flows, and if it hits something hard, it's not going to bust through it. It's going to work around. Now, over time, you got to wear a rock down a river, but the course of a river is determined by the path of least resistance. Whether it's an area that can be that's more easily to flow over or more easily eroded, that's the direction the water is going to take. You have to do the same thing on the tabletop and in combat. You have to take the direction of least resistance. And there's the weak points, which is what this whole chapter is about. Avoid the strong points, go after the weak points. If you can't find the weak points, you need to make them, or weaken the strong points using indirect tactics, not by attacking them hard on. There's tons of examples in history where generals blindly just threw their men at the strong point and it fell apart for them. Okay, I might as well use almost the poster child of this. Even the best general can make this mistake, and we'll use Lee at Gettysburg. He went against the center line, which was the strongest point, not on as far as where the best troops were, but the strongest point as far as the clear fields of fire, the amount of firepower that was able to come down on the approach vector, and the distance that had to be covered. That was a very strong position, and his artillery bombardment did not really prepare it well at all. Yet he still took his strength and went against the strong point that was the enemy. He should have gone around and, just like Longstreet had proposed, completely go around behind them. Don't go attack any other line. Don't bother fighting. Just go around behind them. They'll have to give up the position. So that's how water works. So that's how the military commander or the tabletop general need to work. All right. Now, the last two sentences, I really like the way he's phrased these. The 33rd sentence is, he who can modify his tactics in relation to his opponent may be called a heaven-born captain. So he's really trying to call out, he's showing you right here, it's not the fact that you are successful in a battle that matters. It's your record, and it's your ability to master the different opponents, whether they be different players or different armies that you go up against. Several game systems have multiple armies to choose from. There are a few that still use two sides, basically. But still, it doesn't really matter what you do unless it's in relation to what your opponent does. So, again, previous sentences he was talking about, make your decisions based on what your opponent is doing. Force him to make decisions without knowledge of what you're doing. Okay? And he wraps this 6th chapter up by relating it to his earlier comments about how everything flows one to another. The different elements, the different seasons, they ebb and flow. Everything's fluid. To be successful, you also need to be fluid, and in the sense of being able to relate and adapt to the various things that go wrong. So, a couple things I do want to highlight, especially the last day, the last part of the last sentence. In section 34, and this is where I want to bring this out because it's a situation where you have to look at what the commentators say, and then think about it yourself and try to say, does it make sense? Because none of us are Sun Tzu. We are interpreting his work. So I want to try to add to this particular dialogue in the sense that at one point there was a commentator, actually the commentator of this particular edition that I have, he states that these last sentences where we're dealing with the 4 seasons make way for one another, and there are short days and long days, the moon has periods of waxing and waning. So he says the purport or the purpose of this passage is simply to illustrate the want of, or the need of flexibility in war by the changes that constantly take place in nature. The comparison is not very happy or good. However, because the regularity of the phenomenon which Sun Tzu mentions is by no means paralleled in war. Now, I actually disagree with Lionel in this point. because I think he's taken the metaphor way too literally, and I think he misses the point. I don't believe that Sun Tzu is saying or considering there's any regularity in these. Yes, there are short days and long days, and they progress with the year. Moon waxes, wanes, the progression of the month, very predictable. The seasons predictable, but that actually is not what he's not going after the predictability. He's talking about the fluidity. So even if you go back 2 sentences, how he's talking about water has no constant shape. River is a very predictable path. It starts in one place, it ends in another, and you can see where it goes. You throw the log in one end, you know exactly where it's going to go. But it's over time. So the idea is, Sun Tzu is speaking that there's a lack of constant condition, because every single day there is something different. Something of the 5 elements is different. Something of the season is different. Something of the day is different. Something of the moon is different. Every day is different, which means every moment on the battlefield or in preparation for the battle, everything is different. There is so much that it's ever changing that this is a very strong metaphor. And he really reinforces how no matter what changes occur, you need to make sure the plans are adaptable. A perfect example would be, yes, all these things are constant, but if you take the element, you can have a snowstorm in July, okay? 1800s, it happened in Europe, okay? That is going to change your battle plan if you had planned a certain type of attack the day before when it was nice. The next day, snow, what are you going to do? So if you can change your plans, be adaptable, there is nothing certain. And if you want to kind of cap it all off, remember that all plans fall apart with first contact with the enemy. Okay, that's why you need to have this constant ability to adapt and modify your plans in response to what actually happens, or the conditions that you find on the tabletop or the battlefield. Okay, so remember, during a conflict, strong points have to become weak points, and weak points have to become strong points in order for you to succeed. On the opponent's side, you have to find and avoid your opponent's strong points, or turn them into weak points, and find your opponent's weak points and exploit all of them. Okay? So that's, in a nutshell, Chapter 6. Thank you for staying tuned. Next week we'll start in Chapter 7, and it will be on maneuvering. So please share, like, and subscribe. Let me know what you think below, and we'll continue the discussion. If there's any questions you have, please put them below. I'll try to get to them, and we'll move on from those. I'll probably put his subsequent videos out with those questions in a special edition or special academy, going back and answering questions from different videos that happen to come up. So please do feel free to ask questions. All right, thank you very much. I'll see you in the next academy. Bye bye.